Hi, welcome to Data Analysis for Complete Beginners, where in this episode we're going to analyze insurance rates, and we are going to use a whole host of techniques to find out what the key influencers are that drive insurance rates up and down based on our customer characteristics. So usually when you're approaching an analyst project, you are giving a problem statement. And our problem statement is management wants to have better informed insurance agents. And the way they're going to achieve that, or the goal they have, is to create a guide for insurance agents to help estimate insurance rates based on customer characteristics. Our task as a data analyst is to analyze, hypothesize, and create a data story on key influencers of insurance rates. So questions that management may have for us are, what does our typical customer look like? So what dimensions make up our customer? What customer traits raise or lower insurance rates? Do we typically charge more money for female or male by gender? What is the one trait that skyrockets cost? So these are questions that you may get from management or someone on your team that help give you a more directed analysis. So how do we develop insights? We develop insights by asking WHW questions. Who, what, when, why, how, and why. And in this case, we want to know what's the goals of the business. The goals of any business is to make money, of course. But in this case, we want to make our insurance providers or agents more knowledgeable, which in turn helps them to build rapport and a reputation, which turns into customer loyalty and, of course, more sales. So what is the metric of success or failure? So it's going to be insurance rates. So what drives that cost up or down? What are the trends, positive and negative? And that falls into the relationship between the variables and the insurance rates. Maybe age drives insurance rates up or down, and we'll discover that in our analysis. What influences our metrics? So similar to the previous question, but maybe we want to find out what are the top 3 key influencers, and how can we fix the trends? So for example, lowering or increasing X may increase rates. So we may need to look into how to actually influence that, depending on what we find in our data. So the tools and techniques that we're going to use Excel for our analysis, PowerPoint for our data story. We're going to be looking at a regression analysis, univariate analysis, bivariate analysis, and correlation. And don't worry if you don't know what that is now, I'll walk you through it. Statistics that we're going to be using are mean, median, sum, count, coefficients, or maybe others. Visuals, we may use scatter plots, bar graphs, and box plots, and others also. So data types, we are going to be looking at categorical data. For example, male or female is a category. Region could be a category. And we're going to be looking at continuous data, such as age or something else that may be in our data. So let's jump over into Excel. So here's our data. We are looking at a collection of data in Excel where we have dimensions such as age, sex, BMI, number of children, whether your status is smoker or not, the region, and the insurance charges. So this is our raw data. So we know we have certain types of data here. And the type of data we have here is continuous and categorical. We can see that continuous data is on a continuous scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, into infinity. And then categorical is this very discrete data that is a category. And we're going to have to deal with this data when we start looking at causation and correlation in a bit. So the first thing we were tasked to do is build a profile. And that's quite easy. We could build a profile by using pivots to do that. So Let's create a new sheet where we start building our pivoted visuals with a pivot table. I'm just going to go in, click into any part of your data, navigate over to pivot chart. Then the pivot chart window is going to pop up. It's going to show you that your range of data is covered, and you can see that go from A to G, which is 1,339, which is a total amount of customer records that we have. We're going to create a new worksheet, so I'm going to hit OK. Once I hit OK, then we can start building our categories. I think that one of the questions that we had pertained to gender, so let's look at our customer base based on gender. So here's sex. I'm going to pull that down to our axis, and then I'm going to pull sex down to our values also. So it'll be counting the number of men and women. And you can see it's giving me a bar chart. However, I think because it's only two categories, we can do a pie chart here. So I'm going to take this, click on the visual. I'm going to navigate up to design, then go over to change chart type. Then I'm going to go over to the pie chart. So I want that pie chart, and the main thing I want to be able to do is look at the percentage. So all I need to do is add my data labels by clicking on to the plus sign, and we can see the value there. I'm going to click over to the arrow for more options. And then I'm going to add percentage in the category name. And then I don't need the value. So we can see that our male and female is pretty split evenly. You know, we can customize that by changing the actual color to white. So now that I have that visual, I'll use that as part of my profile. And this is a good way to visualize categorical data using pie charts. So let's continue to build some categorical visuals. I'm going to just copy this pivot. So I'm going to highlight everything, come down right under it and click again. Click into the pivot, get rid of the format for your visual. I'm going to go over to the pivot table fields and click off sex. And then what I'm going to do is go over to a region to see our breakdown of region. And we can see we have Northwest, Northeast, Southeast, and Southwest. I'm going to bring region down into values. I'm going to create a similar visual just by going up to home, go to insert, and then I'm going to go to the pie chart visual. And now I can see region, and we do the same thing by adding our data labels and then adding the percentage and the category name. So we can also see that we're pretty well distributed with our region. So I'm going to leave that visual there. And I'm actually going to call this sheet our visuals 1, because those are probably going to be all categorical. So let's continue to build our profile. We can look for more categorical data. So the one thing that is necessarily not categorical, I'm going to go back over to raw data. We do have children, but I think this is a good category to have. For example, we can look at our children list, and usually people are not going to have more than 5 or 4 children, so we can put that safely in a pivot table. So I'm going to copy this again and add that pivot. I'm going to insert. First, let's get rid of these variables. I'm going to bring over children, bring children into values. Then I am going to go to insert, add a pivot table, And now we can see that pivot. Now what you might want to do is you can always add another deeper category here. For example, I'm going to add a 1. We have 4. There's actually no children. No one in our data set that has 0 children. So I'm just going to add 0 children here. And then I'm going to drag this down and I'm going to show you why. You can see we have 0 children, this probably should be 1 child. But I'm probably going to get sloppy here. 2 children, 3 children, 4 children, and 5 children. So first I'm going to add my label here. Then I'm going to go to more options by clicking the arrow, go to more options. And you can see I can have values from cells. I'm going to click that option. Then I'm going to highlight everything here that I just made. Going to click OK. And then I'm going to click into that. And then you can see we have that label there. I'm going to get rid of value. And then I'm just going to add the percentage. And now we can have a little bit of a more interesting kind of labeling there. And we can see that 33% of the people do have children. So this is helping to flesh out our profile. I think we can go back over to our raw data and see if we want to split anything else up. Oh, we have smoker. That's the last one. So let's go back over to our visuals 1 for our categorical visuals. I'm going to copy this, go under, add, and here I am going to get rid of the format shape. I'm going to get rid of these values. Then I am going to go to smoker. And then I'm going to use smoker and value. Going to go and insert. Create our pie chart, and we can see the majority of our smokers status is no. So we can add a value, hit data label, go to more options, and I'm going to take out value, category name, and percentage. And we'll customize these later in our visual. So we have our categories. So this gives a pretty good profile of our customer. We have about 4 different visuals here that you can add in your analysis for a pretty nice profile. Now the next thing we need to do is deal with the values here, which are going to be continuous, which is BMI, age, and then we need to deal with the charges. So one thing you can do with Excel is we do want to get the average age of our customer. And you can do that just by highlighting the whole column here. And then if you go down to the bottom, you can see the average age is 39. So you can either make note of that or just write it in somewhere. Or you can even use a function. You can use average. And then you can highlight that column. I'm going to press Control Shift and down and then hit OK. And then we can call this average age. We can do the same thing by highlighting that column for BMI. And you can see BMI out of the 1,339 folks that we have there, our BMI is 30.6. So I'm just going to add that in just so you can see it, BMI, and then add our average. For BMI, enter. And then the last one, let's add our charges. Gonna add an average equal to initiate your average function. Then highlight the column, close it off, and you can see there is 13,270 and 42. So I'm going to just change this into a $ or a currency. And there is our averages for our continuous data. Now we don't really want to stop there with our continuous data. We have what we call univariate analysis. So univariate analysis is dealing with one variable and kind of looking at how that is split up. And then we can look at also category to continuous for that analysis. So I'm going to create another visual here. So I'm going to create another page and call this visual 2. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all my data. So Control A and then Control C. I'm going to go back over to visual 2 and just Control V that data. So one of the best ways to visualize data where we want to see the whole distribution of data is a box plot. So the thing that you're going to be asked is, hey, what is the distribution of our charges when we're looking at sex? So is male or female, who is actually paying more average charges? So I like to do this with a box plot because it's going to look a little bit better. So instead of like 2 bar charts, because you'll get to see the whole distribution of your data. So I'm going to highlight the categorical column, which is sex. And then I'm going to go over the charges. And I'm going to highlight that one too by pressing Control and click. Then I'm going to navigate up to Insert. I'm going to go to this statistical chart that looks like a histogram. I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to go to box plot. And now you have a box plot. And this box plot will be our charges by gender. And let me show you what some customizations we can do with this. But first, let's kind of go over box plots just very quickly. So in a box plot here, I'm going to get rid of these. You have your box, which has most of your data. So this line here is the median, which is the 50% line. And all of this is 100% of your data. This is the broken up in quartiles. So under the median is 50% and above the median is 50%. So you're going to get all your data kind of in this box. So this is going to be your top quartile, and this is going to be your bottom quartile. And this X is your median value. And these little dots here would be considered what we call outliers. So they are unexpected. We can do a lot of customizations with this. If I go to Format, I click into the box plot, I go to Format the Data Series. You can see we can click Show Inner Points, where we'll show you all your data in a line. These are all the plots, so I'm going to take that off. This is going to be where you can turn outer points. So the outer points will be our outliers if you just wanted to show the box plot. I like leaving them there. I'm actually going to change the color to something a little bit more transparent. So I'm going to go up to Home, and you can see this fill, and I'm going to go over to, I don't know, like a blue, like a light gray. And then now we can see that. You can definitely add the values here if you want. But one thing I really like to add here is, if we go back over to Format Data Series, is show a mean line. So now you can see that a line has popped up. So we can see that males have paying a little bit more on average. And of course, we can create a pivot to collect all this information. For example, so we're going to create one more pivot so we can have this data on hand. So I'm going to click into Insert. And then I'm going to go to Pivot Table. I'm going to click a new worksheet. And then I'm going to get we're going to call this our pivot. And I'm going to get sex and charges. And once you have sex and charges, you can see there is a slight difference here where men are paying a different. If we turn that into an average, so we're looking at average, so you go to value field settings and change that to average. And you can see that men are paying a little bit more on average. Now, if you wanted to do insert and try to do a bar chart here, if I click insert and then go to the chart and then use this, you're going to get an error that says you can't create this chart because in a pivot table, we're already aggregating the data down. In a box plot, we want to see all our data displayed. So let's go back over to our Visual 2. Now that we've seen charges by gender, let's do our smoker and charges. So we highlight the smoker column, and then we press Control, click, and on the next column, we navigate up to our insert where we see the statistical visual, and then we do a box plot. So we get another box plot, and we can call this charges by smoker. I'm going to change the color. So I'll go over to home and I'll go to the bucket, and then I'll change that. So we can again customize this. We can format the data series here, and I want to be able to add the mean line. So you can see that there is a dramatic shift between smoker and non-smokers, where we can look at the mean, and we can see that the mean, which is represented by the X, is quite dramatic. If I highlight that, you can see that 32,000 is a mean, and for smoker, and 8,434 is our for non-smoker. There are a lot of different outliers here, so there's probably another underlining issue that is driving smokers to go up. I can navigate back over to pivot, copy and paste our pivot table right under that. I can just remove sex, and then we'll still have average charges, but we can split that univariate analysis up by bringing in smoker into rows, and then we get the average, and you can see that 8,000 and that 32,000 there. So it's a huge difference. Let's go back over to our Visual 2, and we also want to be able to get the region and the charges. So I just highlighted both of those. Go up to Insert, go to your statistical visual, and box and whisker plot. Now we have all four of those. It gets a little bit more difficult to see. You can see the whisker here is a little bit longer. Let me change the color so we can make that a little bit more transparent. Oops, wrong one. I'm going to hit Control and hit the visual, then change it. You can see these are quite close. So if we format by right-clicking Format Data Series, adding that mean line, we can see that Southeast has the highest mean, and also the data range is highest here. So there's going to be more data between 0 and 4,000 in this one compared to the other ones. And we can call this our, let's make sure I get rid of this. Change the chart title. We call this charges by region. So this allows us to, and I'm going to get rid of all of the grid lines here. So now we can look at these charges split up by the categories and be able to pretty confidently describe the distribution of that data, because you're going to get asked like, oh, are charges higher for a particular region on average? Are charges higher for a particular gender on average? Are charges higher for smoker on average? So we can answer that. Now what I want to do is look at continuous and continuous. So what we're going to do is create another tab, and I think I'm just going to right-click raw data, which is our tab, go up to move or copy, and I'm going to make a copy of raw data. So I highlight that, go to create a copy, and at the bottom here you can see it says raw data. So here I'm looking at correlations, and this is a, continuous to continuous analysis, where we're looking at two continuous variables. So we know we have age in charges, we have BMI and charges, and I think I'm going to leave children out because it'll be weird because it only goes up to 5. So let's look at these two. So I'm going to go up to age, and then I'm going to go to charges, and I'm going to highlight both of those. So I'm just highlighting age and then right-clicking charges. I'm going to go up to insert, and I'm going to go up to charts. Then I'm going to go to scatter plot. So you can see here we have charges and a BMI. So I'm going to call, age and charges. So there is a linear relationship here. If you look at that, there will be a line here, and we can actually add that line by clicking the visual, going to add a trend line, and you can see this little line here. But let's make it a little bit more prominent. I'm going to right-click, format trend line. You can definitely change the type of trend line, but we're mostly concerned with it being linear because we want to use linear regression as a causation. We're going to then go to the bucket to format it. I'm going to change it to red, and then I'm going to change it to a solid line by clicking dash type, and then I'm just going to make it bigger. So now we can see there's a linear relationship. So you might want to quantify that linear relationship a little bit by using, a correlation factor, which is Correl. So if I am looking at BMI, and let's just put this next to BMI here. Let's call this correlation. And then we can use a function called Correl. So equals Correl, and this is correlations, and it returns a correlation coefficient between two data sets. So we're going to be looking at we're looking at age, excuse me. So let's go up to age, and we type correlation here also. So we're looking at age equals CORREL, which gives us a correlation function. I'm going to just highlight age from the first cell. I'm going to press Control and down because that gives us the array. I'm going to hit the comma, and then it's asking for the next array. You can see it gives us information here if you use the help. So I am going to then bring in charges as the next part. So I'm going to click that, Control Shift and down, and click OK. And here is our correlation, which is 0.29, and this would be describing age in correlation here. So we can take that same function, and let's just do it over so you can see it. We can use C equals CORRL. We can click that. We can go over to our BMI, first cell, Control Shift and down, comma to give us that first array. Just going to navigate back up. Going to get the first on the charges, Control Shift and down, and then I'm going to hit enter. That's going to give us a 0.9. So that means correlation goes from -1, as in extremely negatively correlated, so that means there'd be a negative slope, be going down, to 0, which would be no correlation, to what we want to say as positively correlated, which would be +1. So we know that age is more correlated with charges than, more positively correlated with charges than BMI. So the next thing we're going to do is create a scatter plot with BMI and charges. So I highlighted both of those columns, go to Insert, Scatter Plot. So we can see it's a little bit of a different shape than our age and charges. We're going to add a trend line by clicking the plus sign, going to trend line, going to linear, clicking on that, formatting the trend. And this looks like this is in the way, so let me move this a little bit. Going to the bucket. After we hit trend line, going to the bucket, changing that to red, making it bigger, and then changing the shape to a regular line. So now we have continuous and continuous analysis, where we're looking at two continuous variables, and looking at two variables is another way of saying bivariate analysis. We looked at the correlation between the two, and we created scatter plots for those visuals. So next, what we want to be able to do is, we looked at correlation, now we want to start looking at some causation by creating a linear regression model, so we can describe as what degree do charges change according to a certain variable, and is it significant or not. So we're going to dive into that. So in a regression, let's take our raw data. We're going to make a copy of this. So we're going to right click, make a copy, create a copy. Then we're going to have raw data 2. So we're going to have this regression pre-processing. Okay. So for linear regression, let's get rid of this. We need to have everything in a continuous variable. So we have these categoricals, so we need to feature engineer or recode them or change them in a way where it can be pushed into our regression model. Our regression model needs continuous data. So we need to change these. So I need to encode this. So I am going to just use conditional statements if to change this. So for sex, I'm going to just say equals if, and I'm going to say if the male or female, so this is in column B, so if column B equals, and I'm just going to say female, then give me a 1. Or if not, give me 0. So we can see that's male, and I'm going to call this column female. And then I'm going to go over to the little plus sign, double click that, and now you can see for female we have 1. Now, the most important thing to understand when you are coding these, we do not need to now make a male column, because 0 is the male, 1 is the female. So adding an additional column would create additional correlations that would actually interfere with our linear model's effectiveness. So now we have one column called female. Let's do the next column. We can actually do the BMI column. Now, we had two options for male and female, but we only needed to make one column. So, because it was a 0 or 1. But now we have 4 options, so we need to make 3. And I'll show you why. Because, for example, if we create the first column, just let's say if this column equals southeast, then 1, else 0. And I'm going to call this southeast. And we can, southeast. And then I'm going to call this southwest. And I'm just going to do the same thing if southwest, and give me 1 or 0. And then I'm going to do, let's get rid of this. And then I'm going to go to northeast. Equals northeast. Then give me a 1 or a 0. So we have northeast, southwest. Okay, so 1, 1, 1, 0, 0 would be our southeast. So let's just highlight all those, double click them down. So we know 1, 0, 0 is southeast. 0, 0, 1 is northeast. 0, 1, 0, 0 is southeast. So you might be saying, where's northwest? So northwest would be all 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So there's no need for us to create another column because all zeros are going to give us northwest, and I don't northeast. So the last column we need to do is smoker. So smoker equals if this column equals smoker, yes, then we have a smoker, else 0. And then we hit if, and we know smoker is 0. If you're a non-smoker, if you're a smoker, it's a 1. So there you go. And if you want to read more into this, it's called a dummy variable trap. So we usually always drop one variable, and I'll put a link in the description for you to read more about that. Now we have our categoricals turned into continuous coded variables. I'm just going to copy this, and I am going to just repaste it because I don't want the formulas there. I'm going to pull charges over here. And so I'm going to get rid of region, smoker, and sex. And now we have our data all in continuous. So if we look at this, we want to be able to explain the charges based on each of these variables. And this is called multiple linear regression. So as we saw when we did our correlations, we could see the slope between the two variables. So what we want to be able to do is create a slope with each one of these variables that is able to describe the changes in the charges. And that looks like If we bring in the formula, we can see that we have a y, and this is the beginning of our formula. Each one of that's our dependent variable, which is our charges. So it depends on these independent variables. These independent variables are called your explanatory variables, which they explain the y variable. And each one of these will have a coefficient term next to it, which is the slope that we saw before. So we will see if it's positively or negatively correlated. And then there's a coefficient, which is where that actual linear line starts on the x and the y. And then finally, we will have the error, which is the predicted over the actuals. So how far away is our model at predicting the changes in our charges? So let's create that. So in order for you to do linear regression in the way we want to do it, is you're going to need to use the data analysis tool pack. And if you don't have that enabled on your PC, or not on your PC in Excel, all you're going to do is go over to File, you go over to Options, and then in the options, you're going to go to Add In, and then there's an analysis tool pack that you need to add in. And then once you add that, you hit Go. Mine is already added. Once it's added, it'll be under the Data tab, and you would navigate over to Data Analysis. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to click Data Analysis. Then I'm going to click on Regression and click OK. So we saw the formula that we had, and I'm going to go to the Y input. Let me just get rid of these. It seems to have saved them again. Let me just click everything off so we can do this from the beginning. So our Y input we know is charges. So I'm going to click on the charges column and then Control Shift and down. And that's going to be our dependent variable. Then I'm going to go and put our X range, which is all of our continuous variables. So I'm going to highlight all of these and then press Control Shift and down. We know that our column has labels. I want a confidence level at 95%, which will give us a p-value of 0.05, which is kind of standard. And then I want the residuals, which will be the difference between the predicted and the actual values. And then I want this on a new worksheet. And all I'm going to do is go over to OK. Once that is clicked on, you will have an output. And let's quickly go over this output. So we have multiple R, which is going to give us how well correlated all those multiple variables are. And then we're going to have our model score, which a lot of people use as R squared. So those are going to be the things you're going to judge your model by. Most people go by R squared when they're talking about a model, and it's called a coefficient of determination. Then what we're going to get is we're going to go over to our coefficients, because you can dive deeper into linear regression, quite deep, but I want to give you the main things in this analysis. So as we talked about in our formula, we could see that we have these coefficients and they have a slope, and this slope is positive or negative, and it's going to tell us how things are affected. So for age, we can see that as the age increases, the charges will increase by $256. So if we go over to this p-value, so we want a very low p-value at our border at 0.05. So we know we can use age, which I'm just going to highlight here, as one of our descriptors or explanatory variables to why charges are going. It's significant. with this p-value. Then, and we can see the error here. I'm going to look at BMI. BMI also has a low p-value, so I'm going to highlight this. And we can see for as BMI increases, it increases the charge by $339. Children, if we go over to the p-value, it is also super low. And we can highlight that as something we can use. For female, if I look at that, it increases the charges by 131. However, if we go over to the p-value, it is not significant. So I'm not going to highlight that one. Southeast, we can look at the p-values here. And for regions, it is not significant. So I'm not going to highlight any regions. And then smoker, we have a p-value of 0, and that increases whether you're a smoker or not by $23,848. That is a big increase. So now that we have our regression model, and we can go on into our data story and be able to take our viewers through what we found through our analysis. And if you're interested in diving into more of these metrics, it is really important. Just let me show you one more. Here's our residual output. So here's our predicted charge, and this is our residual. So if we wanted to get the actual charge, we could go back over to our raw data, and I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to copy the charge here and highlight it. And we go back over to our sheet 8, which let's name that regression. And if I actually drop this in, these are our actuals. So you can see how off that prediction might be. So what's our average customer? Our average customer is paying $13,270. They have a BMI about 30.6, and they're 39 years old. They're non-smoking, which is the majority of our customer base, and that all of them are parents, with the big segment being people with 2 kids. Our customer base is pretty evenly distributed around region and gender. So categories. Our categories are gender, region, and smokers, and we want to know how that affects, or the average insurance rates for those. So smokers are paying about 4 times higher on average, while males are about 10% higher. And then Southeast has the highest average rate at $14,700. So now we want to know what the relationship is between age and BMI, and to understand if those things increase together. So relationship with charges, we can see some real strong correlations there. We can see that as age increases, so does our rates. And also as BMI increases, we can see rates increase. However, that's observational, so we want to get in a little bit more specific and find out what are the real drivers of increasing insurance rates. So we use a linear regression model to kind of come up with some of the key influencers that drive insurance rates. And what we see is that if we have a smoker, their rates are going to go up $23,848.53. For each child, we're going to see rates go up $475. And for each increase in BMI per unit, we're going to see things go up $339. And then for each year of increase, we're going to see an increase of $256.86. So what are our recommendations? Our recommendations are that we know that many factors correlate to an increase and decrease in insurance rates. However, the most significant ones were smoking, number of children, increasing BMI, and advancing age. although we know there's a combination of factors that increase insurance rates, agents can use these key influencers or coefficients to kind of gauge how much someone may pay as a predicted cost. And we can use these to actually create a formula to give agents a tool to predict what an insurance rate can be. However, there is a significant error there. So this should be used as a guide. So if you like the analysis and you found that this was interesting, of a value, please subscribe, please share, ask any questions. I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.